Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, another Father's Day episode, this one with Mike Johnston. His father has passed away. He had written me, and we're a similar age. Our dads were a similar age. Our dads both passed away 2 or 3 years ago, and both our dads had Goudeys and play balls. So I thought, let's discuss that in the context of Father's Day. Thanks, sponsors: Topps Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, Compsy.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Authentication. Thanks, everybody, and here it is. We're not that far off in age. Our dads must not have been that far off in age. There's a shared experience and a mutuality that we can explore, starting with Goudeys. My dad had a box of about 400 Goudeys and play balls and Diamond Stars, some Sport Kings. He never went to being a collector, other than when he was a kid in the north side of Chicago. So this buying cards off a wagon blows me away. I think my dad was walking down to the corner store and putting a penny or a nickel on the counter and walking away with a penny pack. A nickel was a lot of money in the Depression area. So what notes did your dad have?
I thought it was a horse and buggy huckster. It actually was an old Ford truck. My dad grew up in northern Ohio, and he taught at Bowling Green. He graduated from there after the war. He had a small farm about 20 miles west of Toledo during the Depression, and they were pretty much self-sufficient on their farm and didn't have a lot of money. They would go to town, and my grandma would go there to get needles and things like that and take my dad. There was a 5 and dime store, and the lady there really liked my dad. So after he started to accumulate a few cards on the Goudey wrappers, he said you could see through them, so he didn't duplicate too many players. But the guy that traveled had this old Ford truck, and it was a store called Raker's Store near Toledo. He would sell supplies like sugar and flour. My dad said he'd go out, wait for a couple hours with a penny or two for the guy to show up. His grandmother lived down the road, and the Goudeys came out in 1933, and my dad was born in 1924. He was too young to work the fields yet, so his grandmother was in ill health, and he'd watch her and make sure she was doing okay. They had a radio, and my dad's family didn't, and they would listen to the Cubs and Tigers games on the radio, and that's how he got hooked into baseball. She sometimes would give him some money for helping her out. And so he would get pennies together to do that. And he said he really didn't have any material things. He had balls and bats. My grandfather's brothers were avid baseball people and good athletes, too. My dad played little minor league ball. A letter I found from Findlay minor league team in 1941 invited him to a tryout. But then the war started because of Pearl Harbor in December that year, and he went into the Navy. During the war, they had drives for materials like even cardboard and stuff. My grandmother, because that was kind of all my dad had, she couldn't give the baseball cards up, so she stored them. When my grandfather died in 1971, she was almost blind at the time, and we were helping her move. I was in high school, and we found this box of all of his baseball cards, and there were old baseball magazines. He sent away wrappers to get the 34 Goudey premiums. All those were there. So my dad was thrilled, and I was just kind of getting old enough where I was getting out of baseball cards at the time, but a real thrill. We took a day or two and just looked through everything together at the time, and that was pretty cool. Then they got shelved again, and I was in college, and it was like 60s and Vietnam War, and we had some disagreements at the time. Later, we just decided, hey, we like each other too much. We got to get along. But a couple of issues, we just won't even talk about them. Baseball became the thing that united us. He bought one of your catalogs in the late 70s, and he bought me the 3rd edition of the Beckett catalog. Beckett started to turn it around for me to get back interested in baseball cards, and we started to collect together, and I helped him finish his Goudey set.
Mike, did you have brothers?
He had a brother that died when I was real young of leukemia.
I have a younger brother. My dad was born in 25. Your dad was born in 24. My dad had a younger brother. I'm guessing when I got the cards from my grandmother and grandfather back in 1959, they were my dad's cards and my uncle's cards.
Okay.
But my dad was the older brother, and he actually was also in the Navy. He was an officer in the Korean War. He was in college during World War II. And then when he got out, he had a Navy obligation when the Korean conflict kicked in. And it turned out I was an Army officer. So that's the closest we came to a disagreement, which was not really a disagreement. I think he appreciated that I served. I know that was divisive on families, but there's just different opinions. And our family got along great. We moved a lot.
We got along good, except on a couple of subjects. And looking back now with my brother dying, that was really heavy on my parents, and there are just some tensions, but it was good communication, and he's a real smart guy, and I'm not complaining.
You had a shared activity.
Baseball was a thing right up to the end that united us. He died about 3 years ago, and a few years before that, I managed record stores. I collect jazz albums for years, and a friend of mine owned a record store, and record store owners are kind of like baseball store owners. There's a lot of cool, honest people in business. And this guy sold a bunch of baseball old radio broadcasts on CD, and he thought I might like them, which he was right. There was a copy of the 1934 Yankees playing the Tigers with Ty Tyson, who my dad used to listen to, announcing for the Tigers. I think it's the oldest recorded complete game. So I sat down with my dad one winter day, and we listened to it start to finish. And it was one of the greatest experiences I ever had, because we both probably listened to more games on the radio than watched them on TV. It was like all of a sudden the game was happening. And Lou Gehrig was in the game, and it brought the Goudey cards to life.
Was it your dad that was collecting the Goudeys and you were collecting the 50s cards, or how did that?
Yeah. My dad collected Goudeys up through 41 play ball, and then I collected 56 through 68 was my focus. Scattered cards here and there, earlier Hall of Famers. My dad was a massive Ted Williams fan, and saw him play when he was in the minor leagues once. I understood his cards, so I would be on the lookout for things he wanted and needed.
Did you go to shows together, or was this an internet?
Yeah, but we never went to a national, but we went to shows around Michigan, and there were a handful of card dealers and friends that we got very close to. You might know Kevin Savage in Toledo.
Great friend. Terrific guy.
Yeah, my dad sold some of his Goudeys to him at one point. And Charles Conlon, he used to come up and visit my dad once in a while.
I knew Charlie well. He's passed away, though.
Yeah, I bought a few cards from Charlie Conlon, a 52 Matthews. He knew I was looking for one. There's a dealer in Traverse City named Rick Keyes, passed away a few years ago, about my age, a little older, and he collected since he was a kid and never stopped collecting. He taught me a lot because he just knew cards inside and out, all obscure issues and all that stuff. He had a massive collection and was a strict grader before I even understood that. His wife got cancer, and he sold his collection to Rosen. He had a mint set of Goudeys and 52s. But when his wife got sick, I helped him organize his stuff to sell it. So I've been in touch with different cards that different people had.
What did your dad tell you about when the cards were coming out, like of the Goudeys? Was he too little to say whether they came out in the spring or the summer or the fall?
He said him and his friends, none of them could put together a collection. They were a little too poor, but between them all, they had most of the cards, and he would trade with them. He could tell they were coming out in series. He didn't really fully understand it. He said the 5 and dime store, sometimes they'd sell and sometimes they wouldn't. So they might have an old box and a newer box. He figured out some of the newer boxes might be of more interest. And at the end of the 33 year, the lady that owned the 5 and dime store, the card she had left over, she gave to my dad, unopened packs, like a half a box. But that was a thrill for him. He mentioned that among his relatives and friends that he traded with, Goudey cards were superior to the Diamond Stars, and you couldn't trade them even up. It didn't matter who the player was or anything.
Might have been the look of them and the marketing. I think Goudey was perceived as being bigger and better, but the Art Deco of the Diamond Stars, still Goudey is the major set of the 30s. But your dad even had Goudey premiums.
The white pens, fine pens. He said he never saw a DeLong card ever back then, but he said the other ones he was trading, and he did like the Diamond Stars, and he told me he thought the 34 set was like an extension of the 33s because it had updated Tiger players that were in the World Series that weren't in the set. Then there was a couple of Diamond Star players, or Tiger players like JoJo White, and Marvin, and maybe another guy that weren't in either of the Goudey sets. He would like to collect the Tiger card.
It's amazing that two different companies, I don't know that they were sold side by side in 34 when you had the 34 Goudeys and you had the 34 National Chickles. But on the other hand, in 35, you had a different Goudey. Did he have any of the 35 or 36, the heads ups and the black and whites of the Goudeys?
Yeah, he had a complete set of black and whites. And he had a complete set of the 35 4-in-1. And he told me at one time he put together almost every puzzle, but then he kept one complete set of fronts and sold the other ones to upgrade star cards and stuff like that.
Are we talking about the 70s, the 80s, the 90s? When is this happening? Because collected in the 30s and 40s like my dad did.
He was big into upgrading about late 80s into 2000 probably in particular. I know he talked to Kit Young on the phone a lot, and Mike Wheat.
Good friends, great guys. Yeah.
I know, like when he called up Kit Young, he used to talk to Kit Young, and he knew that my dad was into the Goudey cards. So, yeah. So
it's simpler days. Did he know anything about the Lajoie? What was his perception
not when
about
he was a kid. He didn't learn about that until he got the card catalogs. He sent away reppers to get the premiums and stuff. He said if he would have known, he would have definitely been one of the people to write in for it, but he was unaware that was an option.
It was one of the key cards back when I got started in the early 70s. It's a hobby of demand more so than supply. Back in the old days, it was all about supply. You wanted to know what was hard to find, and you wanted to pursue that, and there was a search, a quest, and now it's more what's the high demand stuff, and everybody's going after a lot of the same stuff.
Even for me, I had a lot more fun back when people I knew were more willing to trade. And most of the people I knew like that have passed away or aren't maybe as interested.
So what happened to your dad's cards when he passed away? Did they go to you or were they sold?
Yeah, they went. In fact, before he passed away, we put them in a safety deposit box under both of our names. Probably of all the material things that my parents had, I treasure that the most. We spent a lot of time, and he really knew the history and would just go on and talking about different players.
My dad could talk about the players. He played baseball in college. He was a good player. I don't know that he thought being a collector was my lane, but my brother didn't really pursue it. And my dad didn't, but they didn't make fun of me or anything. They loved baseball history and they had been collectors. They'd be more vintage, I think. But my dad could go on and on about going to the games when he was a kid at Wrigley. He was a Cubs fan.
My dad was into the Cubs as well, but more of a Tigers fan when they beat the Cubs in 35.
Yeah. People ask me now, and you may have the same situation, which cards of your dad's are most sentimental? The problem is he had a partial Goudey set that I then completed. He had a partial play ball set that I completed. He had a partial Diamond Star set that I completed. But I'd never kept the records of this was originally his, although on some of them I know based on the condition. He didn't have his initials on them, but I just remember some of these were his, and they have more sentimental value. But again, you just can't take it with you. But it's been meaningful.
Before my dad died, I interviewed him one day and just took notes and went through the cards, and that was fun. And I asked him to point out some of his favorite cards. I remember he really liked Al Simmons. We're talking about the aesthetic of the cards. Gehringer was his favorite player, but Bottomley and the Gehrig cards, he especially liked the 34 Gehrigs. When I listened to that radio broadcast of the Tiger game from 1934, I was watching my dad, and I could just tell he was totally there back in the 30s listening to the game. It was really a great experience. It was a thrill for me. Like Lou Gehrig comes up to bat, and I remember Merle Hogue pinch hit, and I remember that was a high number in the 34s. It was just a cool experience to sit there and do that.
A lot of relating to baseball is through the cards. You mentioned when you contacted me that you're a jazz guy, and you didn't think there were a lot of jazz lovers that were card collectors, and I have a theory about that. But it's mainly just that if you love something, it's hard to love two things. One takes time and it's very immersive.
Right.
And it's a lifestyle or life choices that you make. It squeezed out any other hobbies I had for many years. Now, my number one hobby has always been sports card collecting and mainly baseball, but I love all sports and I love music too. I'm not saying collectors don't like music. They love music, but jazz is very immersive, I think.
I'm kind of like music first and cards are something I shared with my dad, but I've always loved cards. I asked my dad why he liked the cards so much, and his comment was it created great memories and a connection for him back to his childhood.
Radio announcers were so descriptive. You felt like you were there. Somehow they had the sound of the bat hitting the ball and all that stuff. It just was really realistic. And there was an art to it. And baseball is a great game for radio, way more so than basketball or football.
I'm in radio. I do a jazz radio program once a week, and I still listen to the Tiger games on the radio frequently.
I'm saying I love the 56 top set, and you actually prefer 57.
I do. I think it's because I like photographs so much. I actually got a graduate degree in photography, and my last semesters, I really got into hand coloring black and white photographs. I did my final show with hand colored photos, and later I kind of realized that was probably a connection. One of my favorite sets are the 54 Johnston cookies because they're hand colored black and white photographs, portraits. They're almost surrealistic because part of it's left black and white and they're almost like tinted color. It's realism, but it's surreal in a way too because it's an artist's touch on the photo, and I've always liked that.
But they were doing all that stuff by hand. Nowadays,
I know, it's amazing,
you've got all these digitally enhanced, or even AI can do a stylized treatment.
To me, that's a charm of the older cards. Is you really look at the 30 sets and the 50 sets, and you can see the individual efforts that went into making a single baseball card. I like that Braves team that beat the Yankees in the World Series in 57. The 57s, I love the photographs in those. The cards are a little dingy compared to later photographs. There's a little haze over them or something, but I kind of like that.
It's the cardstock, too. It was a product for kids. Appreciably better than the Goudeys. The Goudeys are flat. They're matte flat.
I like the poses in the 57. If you take a lot of the star players, they're some of my favorite photographs of them. The 56 grew on me in time. It's almost like a match between the 30s and the modern era cards that maybe started with 57. It's interesting, once the cards got standardized, like in 57, the really famous sets, none of them are close in size, like the T206 and 33s and the 52s. They're all quite different from each other, but they're all big sets.
And iconic.
Yeah.
In spite of the different sizes.
My dad told me his uncles had a lot of tobacco cards, and that my grandmother wouldn't let him keep them because she frowned upon tobacco. So the bubblegum cards were okay, but the tobacco cards weren't. I think for my dad, he played baseball all the time, and he worked in the farm fields. And I think the cards were the indoor thing, period.
I think it was for me, and it probably was for my dad, too. Thank you for sharing your stories about your dad. We've got some great memories, and in both our cases, we have some cards.
Which is rare. So
wonderful link. It's increasingly rare.